A century ago, a blinding beam of light descended from the heavens, striking the earth with absolute force, transforming the once vibrant blue cradle of existence into a vast, unforgiving desert. Survival forced the remaining humans to retreat into isolated fortresses. In this ruined landscape, a young man reflects on his miserable existence, acknowledging that he has lived a truly wretched life. He realizes that in this era, the weak possess wealth and status while he faces his end. Death approaches because he was simply too weak to endure. Looking out at the desolate world, the young man wonders why the destruction wasn't total, questioning why only the lowly bugs were permitted to remain alive. Inside the cramped confines of a mining bus, a hulking, tattooed man mocks a mistake, claiming his hand slipped with a sneer. He offers a hollow apology, demanding the youth's name to properly address him. The boy identifies himself only as Xian. This lack of family name triggers cruel laughter from the brute, who mocks the possibility of Xian having multiple fathers. As the bus rattles, the narrator notes that the passengers share a dark secret: none of them are actual minors. The tattooed man leans in, suggesting they should get along since they are in the same situation, before asking what crime led Xian here. These men are either desperate fugitives or hardened criminals. The brute guesses at Xian's past, listing assault, fraud, or theft as likely possibilities. Xian remains silent until he suddenly strikes, his fist connecting with the man's face. Standing over his opponent, Xian calls him a fool and reveals the truth: it was murder. In the towering, neon-lit shadows of Neo Soul, the definition of humanity is reserved only for the strong. Xian views his victim as nothing more than trash added to a dump, a thief who died trying to steal his belongings. However, he unknowingly killed a subordinate of Li Jiryong. If the strong are human, then the awakeners like Li Jiryong are gods. Having offended a deity, Xian fled as rumors of the awakeners' pursuit spread, eventually crawling onto this bus bound for the mines. The tattooed man recovers instantly, his hand clamping onto Xian's face with crushing force. He asks if Xian is finished with his outburst. Sudden sharp pain radiates through Xian's skull as he realizes something is terribly wrong. A massive impact rocks the vehicle, throwing the passengers into a chaotic heap. Cracking his knuckles, the brute explains that he is here for the exact same reason. He claims he could have treated Xian like a younger brother, but the boy crossed a line that cannot be ignored. Xian curses his luck. Frustrated that his attempt to escape one awakener led him directly into the path of another, the tattooed man's body begins to glow with a menacing aura, confirming his status as an awakener. The passengers scream in terror as the bus is suddenly hoisted into the air. Men scream at the driver to learn how to drive, but the man behind the wheel only mumbles incoherently. Blood streaks the tattooed man's face as he realizes the driver is dead. The dying man's final words reveal a terrifying truth: they were never heading to the mine, they are currently being consumed. A colossal sandworm breaches the surface, its massive maw creating a swirling vortex that swallows the bus whole. As the vehicle descends into the creature's gullet, Xian reflects on the cycle of his life. Whether in the city or facing an awakener, the outcome is always the same. In this world, the strong take what they want, and his death is just another inevitable consequence of that law. Acceptance settles over Xian as the sand fills the dark chamber. He attributes his demise solely to his own weakness, finding the predictability of his fate almost boring. While he could indulge in the fantasy of being stronger and surviving, he dismisses such thoughts as meaningless ramblings. The sand rises, burying his reaching hand until only silence remains. Deep beneath the dunes, Xian's eyes snap open, glowing with a sudden, fierce intensity. A primal scream tears from his throat as he fights against the crushing weight of the earth. Lightning-like energy ripples through his skeletal frame, illuminating the darkness. Above the surface, the sand shifts as something powerful begins to stir within the desert's depths. His pupils dilate, reflecting a new, burning resolve. Sweat and grime coat his skin, but the despair that once clouded his vision has vanished. A rhythmic thumping echoes like a drumbeat across the wasteland. Visions of a lost world flicker, the rusted remains of the Eiffel Tower half buried in sand and monolithic ruins piercing the clouds. The planet hangs in the void, surrounded by shattered debris, as a spark of light ignites within the center of a dark iris. A name resonates in the silence: Sandblaster. Swirling currents of grit and energy coalesce around Xian's arm, forming a localized cyclone. He strikes out at the beast that tried to claim him, a beam of concentrated power piercing through the sand. He declares his intent to survive in this damned world where everything has been reduced to dust. He swears it. Emerging from the wreckage, Xian stands tall against the backdrop of the desert. Blue markings stain his face and his eyes burn with an unnatural light. He repeats his vow to survive as he stares down the massive creature. The journey is only beginning, with more of his story set to unfold as he carves a path through the endless dunes. Xian stands amid swirling dust, a rhythmic thrumming vibrating through his core. He feels a pulsing sensation clearly, every single cell in his body surging with newfound energy. High above, a colossal, segmented creature looms, its maw dripping with fluid. Questioning if this is the moment of his awakening, Xian readies himself, inviting the monster to strike. Sudden impact jars the air as a powerful figure descends, striking Xian and dismissing him as a test subject who stands in the way. Xian gasps, reeling from the force while struggling to comprehend how this stranger closed the distance so rapidly. He collapses into the sand, his vision blurring as he wonders about the man's terrifying speed. The earth trembles as Zhang Yongbayam leaps, questioning the creature's height before declaring that being up so high is unsettling. With a massive blade, he cleaves through the sandworm, forcing it back down to the ground floor. Xian watches in disbelief, witnessing the ease with which the beast falls. This is the true power of an awakener. A blue-haired woman named Jisel suddenly appears at Xian's side, boasting that Zhang Yongbayam is their captain. Xian flinches, startled by her presence and the strength she possesses. As she grips him, a numbing cold spreads through his limb, causing his arm to freeze. The captain looks on, noting that a sandworm is hardly a tough opponent, while Jisel chirps her agreement. Jisel playfully wonders about Xian's grade and ability, calling for drumroll before her expression shifts to confusion. She announces to the captain that this boy is not an awakener at all. Xian cries out in agony as his arm is manipulated, unable to believe the claim. Jisel points out the undeniable truth: the boy lacks any visible rank insignia on his skin. The captain stares, processing the absence of a mark, while another man shouts about the approaching sunset. Jisel notes that Xian will surely perish if abandoned in the desert. Despite Xian's protest that she nearly tore his arm off, the captain commands them to toss the boy into the Dodge. He reasons that the stranger was likely seeking the mine regardless of his status. The heavy vehicle roars across the scorched landscape, the engine's vibration humming through the floorboards. Inside, a man rants about the dangers of the setting sun and the captain's habit of running off alone. Xian lies bound in the back, marveling at the smoothness of the ride despite his restraints. He focuses inward, watching as a small spiral of sand moves to his silent command. Xian ponders why the others could not perceive his rank insignia. He observes the faint lines on his skin, noting the color is not the blue of magic types or the red of martial types, but the exact hue of the desert itself. Knowledge of rare types exists, yet an ability to manipulate the very sand of the world is something entirely foreign to known history. Though his mark designates him as the lowest F rank, Xian feels a power within that mirrors the boundless expanse of the desert. A dark grin spreads across his face as he resolves to bide his time. He will endure and conceal this gift until it is fully mastered. The desert is not his limit, instead the entire world will serve as his stage. The jagged spires of the Mana Crystal Mine rise against the orange sky, a fortified checkpoint guarding the entrance. A guard barks at Xian to follow, threatening to silence him if he complains about his bonds. Nearby, the captain stands with Jisel, his eyes fixed on a dark, mysterious hole in the distance. He remains unsettled by the boy's solitary survival, sensing something beyond mere coincidence. As the group moves deeper into the industrial complex, the captain's thoughts linger on the captive. He regrets the missed opportunity to learn the boy's name, gripped by a premonition that their paths are destined to cross again. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows over the mine as the weight of the future settles over the scorched earth. Xian stands before the sprawling underground expanse, realizing the mine is far more than a simple network of tunnels. It contains an entire civilization, suggesting that people actually live within these depths. A red-haired guard snarls at him to shut up, ordering him to keep his mouth closed and wait quietly for the supervisor. When Xian questions if he is being left there alone, the man threatens to put a bullet in his head before departing. Xian questions how the guard can be certain he won't cause trouble, but the man dismisses the threat, claiming Xian couldn't do anything anyway. In this third chapter of his journey through the scorched desert, Xian calls the man an asshole under his breath and decides to look around. Hunger gnaws at him, forcing him to seek out a place to eat until something catches his eye. Approaching a food stall, Xian attempts to get the vendor's attention. A propaganda poster nearby declares that through labor, the people will brightly illuminate Neo Soul. The old vendor mocks the grandiosity of the slogan, asking if it sounds grand. When Xian asks if mana crystals are the city's energy source, the man laughs at the inaccuracy, calling the idea funny. He points a finger at Xian, claiming that rats like him are the true energy source. He explains that they do as they are told and replenish their own numbers, making them the perfect fuel for the city. Xian remarks on how much the stranger knows despite their brief meeting. The old man retorts that at his age, with peers already taking a swim in the afterlife, one tends to take an interest in everything. He leans forward, asking if the interior of the sandworm felt like returning to a mother's womb. Surprise grips Xian as he realizes that specific rumor has already spread. The old man calls him a foolish kid, warning that he will soon wish he had simply ended up as sandworm waste. This place is no safe haven to run away to, yet Xian maintains he came only to make money. The man scoffs at the claim, calling it bullshit before offering to show him something interesting. He points toward the shelves, instructing Xian to look over at the collection. When Xian asks how trash could be interesting or if the man is going senile, the vendor explains these are items he has collected one by one over the years. With a chuckle, he reveals these are the final remains of the fools who came here, and Xian's own future. The old man describes how newcomers desperately sell everything to avoid entering the crystal mine. They sell their possessions and even themselves, yet they only delay the inevitable. Time slips away until they meet the same fate, eventually choosing to be swallowed by the mine because it feels easier. He concludes that while some leave a name behind, trash leaves nothing but more trash in death. Looking at Xian with anticipation, the old man asks what kind of trash he will leave behind. Xian ignores the jab and asks for the price of the food. The demand of 10 sol leaves Xian stunned, prompting him to ask if the meat was sprinkled with gold. The vendor argues that everything here is precious, claiming the discarded skewer alone is worth 9 sol. Xian laughs, suggesting the meat must be incredibly cheap if that is the case. He admits he lacks that kind of money and accuses the man of a blatant rip-off. He insists there is no way he is paying that amount. The old man asks if Xian found it strange that he could run a business so openly in a place like this. He leans in, demanding to know what Xian will do now. Panicking, Xian tries to calm him down, insisting he doesn't have the funds. He shouts that the price for the meat is absolute bullshit and begs to settle the matter with words instead of violence. The vendor smiles, claiming he is not cold-hearted and is willing to trade for something else. He specifies that the mana crystal in Xian's pocket will suffice. Shocked that even this rumor has spread, Xian reels from the demand. The old man orders him to hand it over, promising to make an exception and appraise it fairly. Xian curses the situation, thinking of the hardships and the things he went through just to protect the gem. He desperately asks if there is any other way to settle the debt, suggesting store credit as a possible alternative. A massive thug loses patience, asking the old man why he is still listening to the brat. He suggests burying Xian immediately. Suddenly, a sand blaster erupts and blood sprays across the scene. Xian hears a voice calling out to him, urging him to wake up. Xian snaps back to reality as a large man grips his head. The man asks if he is all right, noting that he has been spacing out as if having a bad dream. Xian curses under his breath. Realizing the intensity of his own thoughts, Xian tosses the mana crystal onto the counter, yielding to the demand. The old man appraises the large stone, suggesting it is worth 100 sol. Xian reacts with fury, demanding at least 300 for a gem of that size. The old man remains unmoved, repeating that everything here is precious and suggesting Xian should have stayed inside the sandworm. Rage boils within Xian as he curses the men, thinking that if he truly put his mind to it, he could take the old man down. He repeats the thought like a mantra, telling himself it is not yet the time. Forcing a smile, he tells the old man to ensure he provides plenty of change. Klexi agrees, warning him to be careful with where he keeps his money since pickpockets and robbers are everywhere. Xian retorts that a thief stands directly in front of him. Claiming generosity for their first deal, the old man tells Xian to pick any item he wants from the shelves as his change. Xian sifts through the shelves, dismissing the collection as a complete dump. The old man watches with amusement, noting Xian's obsession with never taking a loss. He sees a petty vitality in the boy that he hasn't encountered in a long time. Xian finally spots something and asks what it is. The man identifies it as an item left behind by a caravan. Xian decides to take the hourglass, doubting he will find anything better. The old man remarks that Xian takes an interest in useless things. As Xian prepares to leave, he asks for the man's name. The vendor identifies himself as Old Man Klexi. Xian tells Klexi that they should never cross paths again. Klexi chuckles, suggesting they will see about that. Later, in the dim light of the miners' quarters, Xian sits alone. He watches the hourglass, noting that only 10 minutes remain until it all falls. He prepares himself for what is to come. A rhythmic cycle of breath fills the silence as Xian focuses on inhaling and exhaling deeply. He stares at the hourglass as the sand runs low. With a final command to himself, he prepares to move. Xian sits on the floor of a dim room, teeth gritted in frustration. He clicks his tongue, realizing the item he found had nothing to do with his awakening. Despite the disappointment, a haunting sense of déjà vu lingers in his mind. The object felt familiar, as if it were calling to him specifically, yet it remained entirely alien. His contemplation shatters as a heavy boot slam against the door. A rough voice bellows from the threshold, demanding to know if he is the new piece of trash that arrived today. The intruder, a massive man with wild hair, screams at Xian to get moving toward the mine. He identifies himself as Back Manhwa, roaring that he shouldn't have to come all this way to collect a lazy worker. Xian stands his ground, retorting that his name is Xian, not a bastard, and points out that no one provided directions. His defiance is cut short as a massive fist clenches, signaling a violent end to the conversation. Violence erupts as Back Manhwa strikes, demanding Xian shut his mouth. He bellows about the audacity of an unawakened person talking back to him. Blows rain down, forcing Xian into the dirt while Back Manhwa asks if he looks like a pushover. He sneers that someone like Xian needs to learn their place and take their beating in silence. Eventually, the brute relents, ordering the battered young man to get up and follow him immediately. Wiping blood from his face, Xian glares at the man's back, silently vowing to kill Back Manhwa for this humiliation. They reach the Sector 3 mine entrance, a dark maw supported by rotting timbers. A nervous worker greets Back Manhwa, who demands equipment for the new recruit. The worker explains that the cost of tools and food comes directly out of Xian's daily wages. When Xian asks about the actual amount of the pay, he receives only more hostility. Back Manhwa mocks Xian's intelligence, asking if he needs a lesson on how to use a pickaxe. He reminds the boy that even the helmet is a debt against his wages. The brute orders the guide to take Xian to Tunnel 972. The guide hesitates, noting that the tunnel is dangerous, but a roar from Back Manhwa silences any protest. Xian retorts with a mocking farewell, prompting one last threat from the enraged foreman. As they descend into the earth, the guide explains Xian's misfortune, noting that Back Manhwa lost everything gambling today. He describes the mine as a den of vice, filled with drugs and prostitution, much like Neo Soul. Xian remarks that business must be good with idiots like Back Manhwa around. The guide warns him that he won't have to worry about injuries in Tunnel 972 because no one has ever returned from it with a single scratch. They arrive at the iron gate of Tunnel 972. Xian assumes it is a simple matter of mining monocrystals and returning, but the guide stops him. With a somber tone, the man reveals that Xian will not be coming back. Over a dozen people have already vanished into the darkness of this specific shaft. The guide offers a hollow apology and thanks Xian for entering the one place everyone else fears to tread. Panic flares as the lift rises, leaving Xian trapped in the abyss. He screams after the departing worker, cursing the bastards who sent him here just because of a bad mood. In a fit of desperate rage, he swings his pickaxe against the unyielding rock. The tool strikes with a deafening crack, the head snapping off and flying deep into the cavern. He cries out for it to come back, realizing he is now truly defenseless. Xian pursues the broken tool, venturing further into the oppressive dark. He notices the air thickening with mana, a density so high it would cause mana overload in any ordinary person. He wonders if the others simply couldn't feel the energy before they died. Finally, his boot hits the ground near the discarded metal. He laughs at his luck, finding the broken pickaxe even though the handle is ruined. As he reaches for the tool, something else catches the light. His eyes widen in shock as he discovers a strange object. He gasps, questioning if he is looking at a pitara. The item rolls across the uneven floor, glowing with an ominous light that reflects in his dilated pupils. The discovery halts his breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him in the silent tunnel. Memories of a harsh past flood his mind. He recalls the whispers of neighbors predicting his early death after his parents abandoned him. He sees himself as a child, bruised and desperate, stealing meat just to survive the night. Back then, his only wishes were to escape hunger and to have the simple luxury of a dream. He was a hunted animal running through the rain-slick streets of a cold city. The visions turned darker, filled with the threats of men like Li Jijiong who promised to end his pathetic life. He remembers the terror of being hunted and the simple desire for a normal life free from the constant threat of death. Suddenly, the cold memories vanish, replaced by a suffocating heat. Xian stirs, his head throbbing with pain as he realizes the environment has changed into something muggy and unbearable. Grabbing a handful of the dark soil, Xian realizes it is actually ash. The truth settles in as he looks at his trembling hands. He concludes that falling through a portal has deposited him directly into the heart of a dungeon. The air is thick with smoke and the ground beneath him is scorched. He stands alone in a landscape of fire and ruin, far from the mines he once feared. The heat is agonizing, forcing a cry of pain from his parched throat. He realizes this isn't a dream. He is in a place that even the forces of Neo Soul would fear to enter. Volcanic ash coats everything like fire-scorched sand. He knows his lungs will fry if he lingers in the lowlands. Logic dictates that if there is an entrance, there must be an exit, likely located at the highest point of the terrain. Xian sets his sights on the distant mountain peak where lava flows like a river of gold. He pulls a cloth over his face to filter the ash, his resolve hardening. He declares himself Xian, the man who refuses to quit regardless of the odds. With a burst of speed, he dashes across the cracked earth, narrowly avoiding a collapse. He pushes forward, his spirit unyielding as he claims his path through the flames. Xian's desperate plea for mercy rings out as he claws at the scorched earth. Heat radiates from the flowing lava, but he refuses to succumb to fear. A guttural roar escapes him as he slams his fist down. Gasping for air, he realizes that his rage only intensifies the sweltering temperature. He forces himself to deactivate his anger, swearing to survive this ordeal. He directs his hatred toward Back Manhwa, promising a swift death for the man once he escapes this hell. Determination hardens in his eyes. He resolves to claw his way out and return at any cost. Calculating his movements, he notes that only 4 more jumps stand between him and safety. He commands himself to move rather than think, refusing to let his life end in such a desolate place. With a final vow to never stop, he lunges forward. A colossal reptilian maw erupts from the molten sea, its jagged teeth framing the tiny figure of the leaping man. The creature's scales shimmer with heat as it lunges, but the protagonist remains airborne, a speck against the vast, fiery predator. Lungs burning, Xian pants heavily as he questions the intensity of the heat. The volcanic ash melts away, confirming his suspicion that he can indeed manipulate the gray particles. Though the ability saved his life, the environment proves more vicious than any magic beast. The searing air roasts his nasal passages, making every breath a struggle. His mind begins to fade into a void as suffocation sets in. Thoughts of death cloud his consciousness. He finds it unfair to perish so soon after vowing to live, especially having never known the touch of a girlfriend. He offers a mental apology to Old Man Yama, stating that the man will have to settle for a crocodile bag instead of his life. A final, desperate cry escapes him as he collapses. A booming voice cuts through the haze, remarking on his amusing ability to manipulate sand. Startled, Xian wonders if the speaker is Old Man Yama. The voice continues to praise his talent as a figure descends. Xian looks up in shock to see an old man falling from the sky, defying the chaos of the dungeon. The stranger's hand grips a massive blade as he plunges toward the earth. His face is set in a manic grin, white hair whipping in the wind. Xian watches in terror, realizing something is coming. A pillar of blinding white light descends, striking the ground with absolute force. A massive shockwave tears through the cavern, throwing Xian backward. He clutches his head, the world falling silent as his eardrums rupture from the impact. Confusion reigns as he tries to process the identity of the old man and the fate of the monster that had been hunting him. The dust settles to reveal a figure standing amidst the flames. Xian realizes this man is no ordinary strong awakener. He exists on a completely different level. Clad in heavy armor and a tattered cloak, the stranger stands over the remains of the beast. He turns his glowing eyes toward Xian and demands to know what is happening. The old man looms over him, demanding a name. He begins a ruthless countdown, giving Xian only 3 seconds to respond. The pressure is heavy as the numbers drop. 3, 2, 1. Time expires before Xian can find his voice. The stranger barks at Xian, asking why he won't answer or if he is simply unable to speak. Xian struggles to hear through the ringing in his eyes, catching only fragments of the man's speech until his hearing finally returns. The old man prepares to strike, declaring that if the boy will not talk, he must die. Panic forces a scream from Xian's throat as he begs for his life. The old man pauses, noting that the boy isn't a mute after all. When asked again for his name, Xian shouts it out. The stranger Deoden scoffs at the name, calling it foolish. Xian bristles at the insult, wondering what kind of name the old man has to justify such mockery. Deoden introduces himself, leaving Xian bewildered by the man's erratic behavior. Xian demands to know what the man is talking about and why he is being threatened despite his gratitude for being saved. Deoden dismisses him with another insult, explaining that the boy has been caught in a snare. He describes the phenomenon of mana overload, where the dungeon creates a secondary entrance to expel energy, reeling in living creatures. He calls Xian's luck foul, noting that most people never see such a thing. Xian curses back Manhwa once more for his predicament. Deoden addresses the boy as a dumbass again, prompting an angry retort from Xian, ignoring the protest. The old man forces Xian to gather mana into his eyes. He instructs him to increase the purity of his mana and perceive the world through it. As Xian follows the orders, a hidden horror reveals itself, leaving him gasping in shock. Deoden observes with grim satisfaction, noting that the boy finally sees the truth. A massive, cloaked monster stands revealed, its presence previously undetected right under Xian's nose. He realizes that without Deoden's intervention, he would have been devoured without ever knowing he was prey. Gratitude washes over him as he recognizes that this man has saved his life twice. He asks for the man's identity once more, only to be called a complete dumbass. Deoden repeats his name, asserting his dominance over the brat. Xian's voice cracks with desperation as he demands to know the identity of the man before him and the nature of the power he wields. The stranger calmly explains they stand within a dungeon, a place that now serves as his personal hunting ground. When Xian repeats the term in disbelief, the man confirms it, challenging the youth to use his own eyes to witness the truth. He reveals himself as Crayon, a name that hits Xian with the force of a physical blow. The air in the cavern grows heavy as the revelation takes hold, leaving the young man gasping in sudden shock and confusion. Confusion grips Xian as the elder's inexplicable movements defy logic. A swarm of fiery avian shadows erupts, surrounding the young man and drawing a cry of alarm from his throat. The title of the Sandmancer of the scorched desert hangs in the air as the old man barks a harsh command. He calls Xian an idiot, telling him that if he possesses any worth at all, he must find a way to survive this trial on his own. Xian can only curse the madness of the man as the heat intensifies. Pain flares as the winged bastards strike with impossible speed. Xian snarls, unable to track their darting forms as they weave through the air like living embers. They are too fast to outrun, forcing him into a desperate defensive stance. Frustration boils over because the creatures seem to target his left side exclusively. A sharp hiss cuts through the air as the assault continues. Despite his efforts, neither his control over the sand nor his physical sight can keep pace with the relentless predators, leaving him bloodied and gasping. Realization strikes Xian that he will perish if he remains stagnant. The memory of the old man pulling him from the brink of death twice weighs heavily. To fail now would prove he is nothing more than a useless idiot. He commands his mind to think, to find a path through the onslaught, even as the old man continues to berate him for his perceived incompetence. The elder's voice provides a grim lesson, promising to show Xian exactly why he is an idiot. He commands the youth to gather mana within his eyes and focus with absolute intensity. The purity of the energy must rise, shifting the burden of sight from flesh to spirit. Xian attempts to imagine seeing through the mana itself, perceiving the presence of the monsters rather than watching for their shapes. A golden light ignites within his iris as he begins to track the flow of power in the darkness. Success depends on timing. When the monster's mana draws near, the counterattack must strike from the shortest possible distance. Realization strikes Xian that the old man might have orchestrated this entire ordeal to force this growth. Questions regarding the elder's true nature fill his mind as Crane's booming laughter reverberates through the cavern. The man is clearly enjoying the carnage, claiming it has been a long time since he was this fired up. He demands more from the abyss, his spirit rising in the heat of battle. Standing before a colossal, toothy maw that dwarfs the surrounding stone, the warrior remains undeterred. He bellows into the darkness, ordering the unseen forces to keep the challenges coming. The scale of the conflict reaches a peak as the massive creature looms, yet the man's thirst for combat only grows. Odin stands amidst the wreckage of his latest kill, lamenting the pity of it all. With a frustrated shout, he complains that it is a shame because he was only just getting warmed up. The old warrior demands to know why there are so few monsters in dungeons lately, letting out a heavy sigh for how things used to be back in his day. Dust and debris settle around his massive sword as he stands unchallenged in the crater. Xian watches from the sidelines, his face streaked with blood as he realizes this is actually insane. A sense of pity for the monsters washes over him because Odin killed those massive beasts so effortlessly. To kill all those monsters just like that is so absurd he doesn't even know what to say. Scanning the desolate, fire-scarred landscape, he hopes there aren't any more monsters left, but a sudden, ominous rumble makes him curse as he realizes his luck has run out. Deafening sound waves hit Xian, forcing agonizing groans and coughs from his throat as he collapses to the dirt. He wheezes through the pain, wondering what that crazy power was just now. Odin stands calm, explaining that the sound is the roar of the boss. Every dungeon has a final boss serving as the source of the area, and Odin reveals that this beast is the sole reason he entered this place. Xian stammers in terror, realizing the true boss is finally emerging from the flames. Odin grins with predatory delight, welcoming the crimson drake as it finally makes its appearance. The massive creature erupts in a storm of blue and orange fire, its wings casting a shadow over the scorched earth. Looking at the winged terror, Xian asks if the thing is a dragon, but Odin clarifies that it is unfortunately not. Despite the distinction, the old man notes that it should still be a B-rank threat at the very least, fueling his excitement for the coming clash. Xian's mind races at the mention of a B-rank. Staring at the shimmering aura and identifying it as a force field, Odin looks back, surprised that a cripple like Xian knows about such things. Xian explains he has only heard of them, knowing that monsters B-rank and above possess unique traits similar to humans. Just like the rank insignias of Awakeners, he notes that a red force field indicates martial-type traits, but this creature is radiating something different. The realization hits Xian like a physical blow as he points out that a blue force field like this one means the creature is a magic type. His eyes bulge and his teeth grit in pure terror, screaming that this is way too overpowered. Above them, the crimson drake looms, its wings wreathed in freezing blue energy that contrasts against the molten ground, creating a terrifying display of elemental dominance that defies everything Xian knows about survival. A sense of total futility washes over Xian as he stares at the scale of the battle. Everything feels meaningless, his common sense, his past experiences, all of it. In the presence of an old geezer like Odin, the rules of the world seem to crumble. He watches, paralyzed, as the drake opens its maw to gather a sphere of concentrated magical energy, ready to obliterate everything in its path with a single breath. Odin doesn't flinch, letting out a sharp shout as he lunges forward. He meets the beast head-on, his blade clashing against the massive, armored snout of the drake. Sparks fly and the ground shatters under the pressure of their collision. The old man's eyes glow with a fierce manic light, proving he is more than capable of trading blows with a B-rank magic-type monster without backing down an inch. A boisterous laugh erupts from Odin as he mocks the Drake, asking if the strike hurt. He tells the beast not to fret because he will personally end that pain. With a wild look, he declares that today is the day of the Drake's funeral. Meanwhile, Xian is caught in the chaotic wake of their battle, screaming that today is actually the day of his funeral. He calls them both crazy bastards, desperately begging them to just talk out their problems with words. Xian grinds his teeth, struggling to stay upright as the sheer shockwaves from the impact threaten to tear him apart. He wonders how just the secondary force of their blows can do this much damage. Odin, however, is having the time of his life, laughing about how much fun this is. The old man's hair flows wildly in the wind as he continues his relentless assault, completely ignoring the destruction he's causing to the environment. Odin continues his joyful rampage, asking the Crimson Drake if it feels like they are at an amusement park. He calls out the beast's name with terrifying enthusiasm as another explosion rocks the cavern. Xian can only utter a single curse as the ground beneath him vanishes. The power levels on display are so far beyond his comprehension that he can do nothing but watch his life flash before his eyes while being tossed like a ragdoll. Gravity takes hold as Xian is launched through the air, his body tumbling helplessly over the scorched earth. The battle between the man and the Drake continues to tear the desert apart, sending plumes of sand and fire into the sky. He falls toward the shifting dunes, a tiny speck compared to the titanic forces clashing above, wondering if he will even survive the landing of this encounter. Odin's laughter booms across the battlefield as he mocks the massive dragon. He demands to know if this is truly all the beast has to offer. It is pathetic to see a dungeon boss like Drake bowing its head repeatedly to a mere human. Odin jeers that the very title of boss must be weeping at such a shameful display. Suddenly, the dragon shifts its stance, triggering a smirk from the old warrior. Odin admits that, as expected of a boss creature, actually knows how to pull off a move like that. Drake's massive jaws hang open, frost and energy swirling within its maw as it prepares a devastating blast. He reveals that he scoured the desert for an entire year just to catch this specific beast. His goal is clear: he needs the dragon's heart to temper his massive blade, Crayon. With cold determination, he looks down at the monster. The hunt is over. He tells the creature to simply die. Odin lets out a dark chuckle. He turns his attention to the massive blade, remarking that Crayon has grown significantly stronger. The sight is bizarre. Xian watches the old man talk to the weapon, wondering if he really is just a crazy old geezer. Xian can't believe the old man actually took down the Drake in the end. He concludes that Odin is nothing but a crazy, overpowered old geezer. Odin turns around, calling Xian a clod and expressing surprise that he somehow managed to survive the chaos. Xian admits that while he almost died, he is still standing. Xian gasps for air, cursing his luck while realizing he survived yet another brush with death. He prides himself on his resilience. He explains that getting hit constantly by the old man's shockwaves actually improved his reflexes, which is the only reason he is alive. Odin laughs, noting it is not bad for a clod. He warns that with the boss dead, the dungeon will soon collapse. They need to move fast, but Xian is confused as to why the old man is suddenly grabbing him. Boom! Odin hurls Xian through the air. He shouts a farewell to the clod as Xian screams back, calling him a lunatic and claiming he is worse than Manhwa. They crash through a rift and tumble onto the desert sand. Xian spits out grit, demanding to know where they are. Odin explains they are outside because the rift from the collapsing dungeon serves as an exit. When Xian asks why they didn't just walk out, Odin shuts him down, telling the clod to listen up. Odin gets serious. He states that he needs Xian's ability to manipulate sand, but the boy is currently useless because he is incredibly weak. He lays out a choice. One direction leads to Neo Soul, where Xian can return to his old life. The other option is to follow Odin and become a better clod than he is now. Xian is stunned, asking how long this would even last. Odin admits he doesn't know. It could take months, years, or even decades. The ultimatum is here. Odin demands a choice right now. Xian can return to his familiar and comfortable life, or he can throw himself into a gamble where there is a 99% chance of dying. Odin stares him down, commanding him to choose his fate. Xian scoffs at the notion of a choice, his face twisting into a grin as he tells the old man not to make him laugh. He demands to know if the elder has truly lost his mind, questioning the logic of abandoning a house, a bed, and shade to trek through a scorching wasteland. When Odin confirms the harsh reality of the path, Xian declares there is nothing left to discuss. He commits to the journey, vowing to follow the man into the dunes. Internalizing his motivations, Xian admits to being the type who must repay every slight, yet he remains too weak to claim his revenge. He directs this toward Odin, acknowledging the man is immensely stronger than anyone he has ever encountered or likely will meet in the future. This realization brings a sharp certainty. He believes that by following this master, he will become stronger than anyone else. Odin merely grins, warning that the day will come when Xian regrets such certainty. Odin commands the idiot to follow, emphasizing the vast distance remaining. Xion snaps back, demanding the old man stop calling him that name. As the sun beats down, Xion's pace falters, his voice cracking as he begs to go slower. 6 hours of continuous walking have pushed him to his limit, and he desperately pleads for break. Met with silence, he screams at the elder, questioning why he says nothing and comparing Odin's erratic mood swings to those of a teenage girl. Sweat beads on Xion's skin as the temperature climbs toward 50 degrees. Every step through the shifting sand is a struggle, threatening him with heatstroke and dehydration. Seeing his struggle, Odin calls him a complete fool, noting that Xion cannot even utilize a fraction of his inherent power. Xion gasps for breath, asking what the master means. Odin finds it pathetic that someone with the ability to manipulate sand would struggle to walk upon it. Xion protests, citing his recent awakening, but Odin dismisses the excuse as irrelevant. Xion argues his status as a simple F rank, contrasting himself with a high-ranking awakener like Odin. This sparks a roar of fury from the elder, who tells him to stop spouting idiotic nonsense. Odin bellows that rank is meaningless and that even those born with S-rank gifts are simply blessed. He demands to know if Xion intends to give up on life just because he lacks that initial blessing. Grabbing the boy, Odin declares that in the eyes of others, Xion is already blessed enough. The word lingers in Xion's mind. Odin orders him to stop whining and start thinking about how to utilize his abilities. He mocks the boy for having working limbs but a useless brain. He insists that Xion must be the one to understand his own power and find a way to break through his thick skull to grow. When Xion tries to respond, Odin's grip tightens with a sharp crack, threatening that if the boy cannot figure it out, he is as good as dead. Xion howls in pain, begging for the master to loosen his hold. Standing amidst the swirling dust, Xion calculates that his control extends only 5 meters. Though disappointing, he decides it must suffice. He focuses on the sand sinking around his ankles, realizing that solving this will preserve his stamina. He attempts to condense the grains into a solid surface. While it makes walking effortless, the drain on his mana is too severe for a long journey. Realizing the inefficiency, he decides he must scrap the idea and find a better way. Xion experiments by focusing mana into his legs, finding it easier to move but realizing it ignores his actual ability. Odin watches from a distance, reflecting on the privilege of youth and the boy's refusal to give up. He observes that while Xion is officially F rank, his mana utilization already rivals an E or D rank. Suddenly, Xion finds the solution. By controlling only the thin layer of sand directly beneath his feet, he moves with newfound ease. He shouts for the old man to look, boasting of his success. Xion's arrogance returns as he mocks Odin, asking if the old man can even replicate his technique. He sticks out his tongue, bragging about how comfortably he can walk now. Odin finds the scampering annoying and warns him not to waste energy or the desert will claim his life. The warning comes too late as Xion collapses face first into the grit. Odin stands over the unconscious boy, calling him an idiot once more and urging him to breathe. Xion stirs, his vision blurred as he questions his location in the desolate waste. Odin stands over him, greeting his consciousness with a sharp insult and a complaint about the precious time wasted on the youth's recovery. Despite Xion's protests regarding his battered and wounded body, he is met with no sympathy. Instead, a piece of jerky hits the ground with a dull thud. Odin commands him to eat while listening to a tale of a bygone era. In the old man's youth, survival was a certainty even for the weak, and shielding the vulnerable was a mark of nobility, a concept almost unimaginable in the current age. The world has shifted into a harsher reality, one Odin admits he cannot reconcile with his own history. He offers a grim ultimatum: Xion can remain in the dirt and die comfortably, or he can find the strength to stand on his own feet. Accepting the challenge, Xion pulls himself up, his throat working as he swallows the meager offering. As Odin tosses another item aside, Xion stares at the veteran, struck by the sheer weight of time and the mountain of memories the man must carry within him. Xion observes Odin's peculiar way of eating the tough jerky, realizing the man isn't chewing but using saliva to soften the meat. In a moisture-starved wasteland, this efficiency is the only logical path. Frustration bubbles up as Xion wishes he had been told the trick beforehand. He recognizes that Odin isn't merely providing food, he is demonstrating survival, even if Xion has never seen the fish mentioned in the old man's metaphors. When Xion boldly asks for another piece, Odin sharply commands him to remain silent. Night falls with a bone-chilling intensity, forcing a violent sneeze from Xion's lungs. The desert air is unforgiving, made worse by Odin's strange behavior as he whispers to his massive blade throughout the dark hours. Xion questions the man's sanity, unable to rest. Thirst becomes a physical agony, yet as Xion searches for water, he discovers Odin's secret. The old man wrings his moisture-laden clothes, drinking the dew collected overnight. Xion's anger flares at the realization that Odin kept this vital resource to himself. The logic of Odin's actions becomes clear. He had spread his garment specifically to harvest the morning mist. Xian seethes, promising himself that once he attains true power, he will have his revenge on the eccentric elder. Odin interrupts his internal vow, calling him an idiot, which Xian indignantly corrects to being a dumbass. The banter dies instantly when Odin's expression shifts. He asks if Xian can feel the tremors in the earth. Multiple sets of vibrations pulse through the sand, signaling an approaching threat. Bighorn hyenas emerge from the shadows. Though typically nocturnal, they have cornered the pair at the break of dawn. Odin tests the youth, asking if he truly believes he can survive this encounter or if he requires another rescue. A low growl vibrates through the air as the predators close in. Xian's pride surges. Flashing a defiant grin, he points a finger forward and declares that he has no need for the old man's interference. Xian throws himself into the fray with a roar, determined to prove he can navigate this world through his own strength. Odin watches with a dismissive click of his tongue. Swirling energy begins to coalesce around Xian's hand as he prepares to strike. The hyenas leap, their forms silhouetted against the dim light. A massive eruption of power tears through the ground, sending sand and predators flying as Xian unleashes his initial assault. The sheer number of beasts is staggering, forcing a desperate cry from Xian as he realizes the magnitude of the pack. Fear gnaws at him. If he doesn't find a way to manage his mana, he will be drained and defenseless long before the last hyena falls. He needs a strategy that prioritizes efficiency over raw force. As he struggles to think, a hyena lunges, snapping at his heels. Xian strikes back in a rage, cursing the cowardice of the beast for interrupting his focus. Pain flares in Xian's arm where a predator's tooth has left a bloody mark. He stares at the wound, grimly noting that the creature has gifted him a new ventilation hole. The word repeats in his mind, sparking a sudden realization. He doesn't need to overpower them with massive bursts of energy. The solution is simpler and far more lethal. He only needs to create holes in his enemies, just as they have done to him. With a dark, determined smile, Xian focuses his power into precise, needle-like strikes. Golden beams of mana erupt from his palm, skewering the leaping hyenas mid-air. The predators are silenced instantly as the energy pierces through their skulls and chests. Xian's manic laughter rings out across the dunes as he questions if he truly needs to blow the heads off every beast. He reasons that whether a skull explodes or a simple hole is punched through it, the result remains the same. His mind shifts to the cold logic of the battlefield, where mana is directly linked to one's life. Panicking and wasting energy only leads to an early grave. He reminds himself to use the minimum lethality and mana required for an opponent, prioritizing cost efficiency above all else. Observing Odin, he notes the older man is also methodically taking the pack down one by one. Xian laughs again, mocking the hyenas by claiming their desperate attacks merely tickle. Odin confronts the snarling pack, labeling a beast a damn mutt. He declares that a dog prone to biting people cannot be permitted to live. With a roar, he challenges every creature present to face him right there. Xian watches with growing dread, realizing the old man is about to unleash his devastating power once more. Odin bellows his intent to wipe them all out, his voice a thunderous promise of total annihilation as he strikes. A deafening roar of impact follows the strike. Xian stares at the resulting devastation, questioning if Odin is even human. He wonders if such a feat is possible without the aid of a skill. Fear takes root in his mind, and he resolves to watch his mouth around the old man from now on, fearing a single wrong move could be his end. Nearby, the hyenas continue their rhythmic barking and growling. Odin, standing over a fallen beast, complains about the noise threatening to bust his eardrums. He asks the creature if she is the alpha female, noting that she makes quite a fuss for a leader. Static crackles through the air as a hyena unleashes a surge of energy. Odin identifies the shimmering barrier as a force field, realizing the creature's power exceeds B rank. Seeing the sudden surge of lightning, Xian screams for the old man to look out. The air hums with lethal intent. Yet Odin remains standing amidst the sparks. Xian can only stare in confusion, his warning hanging uselessly in the air as the dust settles. Odin finds the electrical discharge pleasant, describing it as a nice, tingly sensation that loosens up his stiff shoulders. Since the massage is finished, he coldly commands the beast to die. Xian laughs at his own unnecessary concern, deciding it is better for his mental health to simply stop paying attention to the monster that is Odin. He asks the old man if they should get going now that the pack is caught. Odin simply calls him a dumbass, acknowledging with a gruff tone that the boy is still alive. Xian gestures toward the remains, asking if Odin intends to take the trophy with them. Odin explains that the horns of bighorn hyenas possess many uses, especially since they carry a lightning attribute. He tosses a dagger to Xian, declaring that the time for free handouts has ended. From this point forward, Xian must procure his own food. Odin warns that while the muscles of these beasts are highly toxic, the flank meat is poison-free. He urges the dumbass to hurry because the sun is coming up soon. Xian quickly complies with a shout of affirmation. Xian hums contentedly while chewing on a strip of meat. He finds the situation great, noting that while he is a bit thirsty, he has plenty to eat. His new skill, Sand Walk, makes the trek across the shifting dunes a total breeze. He taunts Odin, asking if the old man is jealous or if he is pushing himself too hard at his age. Xion laughs as he successfully dodges a retaliatory strike. Odin sighs at the crazy bastard, lamenting that Xion is acting up just because he obtained one shitty skill while others work their bones off just to walk. Xion grumbles about being shoved face first into the sand, complaining that a simple joke shouldn't lead to such treatment while he is already dying of thirst. He stops mid-sentence, sensing a change in the air. He questions if he is imagining the sudden feeling of moisture. Seeing Odin looking in the same direction confirms his suspicion. Hope flares as he realizes something lies just beyond the next ridge. He shouts in realization that the oasis he had only heard rumors about is actually there. The two men crest the final dune to find a pool of shimmering water nestled in the sand. Xion cries out in pure joy at the sight of the oasis. The harshness of the desert finally gives way to the promise of life. Xion hurtles down the shifting sands, his voice ringing out in a manic cheer at the sight of water. He exclaims his joy, noting how many days have passed since he last laid eyes on such a miracle. Behind him, Odin stands atop the ridge, a look of pure disdain on his face as he clicks his tongue at the boy's recklessness. Plunging into the depths, Xion celebrates his arrival. He revels in the sensation of the liquid soaking into his skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive desert heat that exceeds 50 degrees. For the first time in days, a soothing coolness penetrates his body, bringing a fleeting moment of happiness. Suddenly, his eyes widen as a strange light appears in the dark water. It is blinding and warm, drawing his focus away from his relief and into a dangerous trance. A heavy lethargy washes over Xion as he stares at the glow, his mind clouding with an unnatural exhaustion. Before he can succumb to the lure, Odin's voice thunders across the dunes, demanding he snap out of it immediately. The master curses him as a dumb bastard, his shout cutting through the days like a blade. Xion's eyes snap open in terror as the reality of the trap begins to set in, the water no longer feeling like a sanctuary. The surface of the water erupts in a violent spray as Odin strikes. A massive, jagged form surges from the depths, triggered by the master's intervention. Great waves of sand and water crash against the shore, forcing Xion back as the hidden predator reveals its true, monstrous scale. The sound of the impact echoes across the barren wasteland, signaling the end of the creature's hunt and the beginning of a harsh lesson. Xion stares in awe at the mist, marveling at the sight of a rainbow forming in the spray. Odin ruins the moment, identifying the beast as a sand angler. He explains that the creature uses the lantern on its forehead to lure and devour its prey. Realizing Xion's incompetence, Odin strikes him, demanding to know where the boy threw away every lesson he was taught. He mocks Xion for acting like a big shot just because he got a little used to the desert. Odin's fury does not subside as he screams that idiots like Xion are always the first to die in this desert. He demands to know if the boy understands his precarious position. Xion can only offer a weak affirmation. Letting out a tired breath, Odin points to the carcass and commands Xion to skin it. He explains that the C-rank monster has soft, elastic belly skin perfect for crafting a robe. When Xion asks if the master needs a robe, Odin's patience reaches its limit. The master roars that the robe is for Xion, not himself, calling him an absolute fucking idiot. He questions if Xion's intelligence is dropping by the minute or if a spell has petrified his brain. Xion offers a tearful apology, his face bruised from the lecture. Odin notes that the sand angler resembles a fish that used to live on Earth, telling the boy to take a good look. Xion trembles, realizing this is his first time seeing a fish and concluding that such creatures are terrifying. Xion begins the task, but Odin mocks his progress, asking if he is merely scratching the beast's back. The master jokes that the touch is so gentle a dead fish might come back to life. Frustrated, Xion insists he can do it himself. He realizes the hide is tougher than expected and centers his focus. By infusing his blade with mana, he increases its cutting power. He plans to whittle a fin into a needle and use carved tendons as thread to complete the task. The final result is a disaster. Xion stares at the tattered remains of the hide, realizing it is a total failure. Odin watches from a distance, lounging against the monster's remains with a look of bored contempt. He calls Xion an idiot once more, stating plainly that the boy has turned a valuable fish into nothing but trash. The mangled scraps lie in the sand, marking yet another failure in Xion's long road to survival. Odin grins, boasting about his remaining materials and demanding one more attempt at his craft. Success finally arrives, a triumphant cry ringing out as the work finishes after 8 grueling failures. He jokingly welcomes the youth to the Xion boutique, but the levity vanishes instantly. Calling Xion a dumbass, he ignores the boy's desperate protests to keep his own robe. Odin commands him to stop the nonsense and presents a massive, pulsating organ. He orders Xion to eat the sand angler's gallbladder, a rare medicine, warning that every gram must be consumed. The penalty for refusal is death. Struggling with the weight of the organ, Odin urges the boy to take it before his arm falls off. Xian silently hopes the limb does exactly that. Swallowing hard, he resolves to consume the medicine, fearing a beating more than the expected bitterness. To his shock, the texture resembles a cloud rather than filth. No matter how much he devours, the sensation of fullness never comes. Once the task is complete, Odin's tone shifts to a chilling promise. He calls the boy a dumbus once more, declaring that it is now time for him to burn to death. Xian can only stammer in confusion at the sudden threat. Agony erupts. A strangled cry escapes Xian as his flesh begins to sear from within. The heat transcends physical limits, sending his mana spiraling into a chaotic frenzy. A sun writhing in his stomach threatens to tear him apart. He screams that he cannot survive this, but Odin remains unmoved, commanding the dumbus to endure. The old man speaks of the oasis, claiming everything eventually vanishes into the quicksand only for life to begin anew. Sand anglers will return and the cycle of the desert will continue. Xian's only response is a pained howl directed at the heartless old geezer. Desperation takes hold as Xian begs Odin to stop the crappy sentiments and save his life. His screams of vengeance against the old man eventually fade into a forced silence as the Sandmancer of the scorched desert continues his work. Odin tells him to shut up and sleep. Time passes in a blur of heat and unconsciousness. When Xian finally stirs, the world is a haze of sand and sky. He gasps, wondering where he has been taken. Suddenly, Odin's face looms over him, asking if the dumbus is finally awake. The shock sends Xian recoiling, his voice cracking as he shouts that the old man nearly scared the life out of him. Odin chuckles, asking if his student enjoyed his rest. Xian corrects him, noting that passing out is hardly sleeping. When questioned about his physical state, Xian pauses. The expected pain is gone. Instead, his frame is as light as a single grain of sand. Muscles have transformed into something as tough as wire. And mana surges through his veins like a localized storm. He marvels at this sudden, explosive growth. Odin attributes the change to the gallbladder, explaining its priceless nature to desert travelers. It is a gift that grants the power to endure the sun and sand, holding value equal to a mana stone. Looking at the boy, Odin notes the medicine exceeded his expectations and offers a rare word of congratulations. Xian is stunned that such a precious item was used on him. Odin scoffs, claiming it was only because Xian was too weak to be useful. If he is to be dragged along, he must at least carry his own weight. Xian beams, promising to become reliable and useful. The old man cuts the chatter, ordering him to eat. They remain by the carcass for 4 days, feasting on the abundant meat of the angler. Finally, Odin stands, asking if the dumbus is ready to move out. The journey resumes. Xian follows with a newfound vigor, shouting his readiness. A massive sandstorm rolls across the dunes, but the boy finds the gale is nothing more than a refreshing breeze. He watches Odin, who marches forward without a single moment of rest. The old man has remained silent for days, prompting Xian to wonder if he is suffering through a strange mood swing. As 2 weeks pass without rest and the landscape remains unchanging, a seed of doubt takes root. He quietly questions if the man leading him even knows where they are going. Frustration boils over as Xian sighs, questioning if the crazy old geezer has lost their way. A piercing screech breaks the silence. A massive, multi-legged predator lunges from the sand, but Xian remains calm, telling the beast to shut up. He wonders how much further the path stretches as more creatures emerge. Odin observes that the creature is sturdier than it appears. Xian realizes the situation is more dire than a simple encounter. Though he hoped to pass by unnoticed, the thick webbing beneath his feet suggests otherwise. These predators are dead serious about their hunt. Accepting the inevitable, Xian prepares for the fight. He calls for the hidden hunters to show themselves quickly. There is no time for a prolonged struggle. If he falls behind, the old geezer will surely kill him. A sharp smack resounds as he strikes the ground, channeling his power. The desert air fills with the frantic chittering of the swarm as they close in. He acknowledges that the creatures are listening well to his provocation. With a sharp focus, he prepares to unleash his blaster ability, the sand around his feet beginning to swirl in a violent, controlled vortex. The storm intensifies, yet Xian finds a strange comfort in the chaos, noting that days with sandstorms are actually quite nice because sand is everywhere he looks. His focus wavers for a moment, and he realizes Odin has vanished into the haze. Panic flares as he screams into the wind, accusing the old geezer of playing dirty and leaving him behind. He rants about the man's complete lack of camaraderie, claiming that such a cold attitude is exactly why Odin is still wandering alone at his age. A heavy silence follows his outburst. Xian freezes, wondering if the old man actually heard his insults. Terrified of the consequences, he starts to stammer an apology, unaware that his detection zone only extends to a 10-meter radius. Xian has always remained alert to his surroundings, never allowing his guard to drop for a second. This constant vigilance usually allows him to react the instant a monster appears, however. The sensation currently washing over him is different from anything he has felt before. What he senses now is closer to sheer terror than a simple predatory threat. From the dunes, a massive army of giant ants emerges, their dark carapaces gleaming. Xian is stunned by the sheer scale of the force, wondering where such a massive army could have possibly come from. He instinctively starts to call out for the old geezer again, but stops himself. He questions how long he intends to act like a kid, constantly relying on Odin to bail him out. He realizes there is no way a man of Odin's caliber failed to detect this swarm, which means this encounter is a quest the old man intentionally left for him to solve. Gritting his teeth, Xian stares down the encroaching insects. He tells himself that whether there are 1,000 or 10,000 bugs are still just bugs. He lunges forward, sand exploding around him as he engages the swarm. The bravado is short-lived as the weight of the swarm bears down on him. Xian screams in frustration, taking back his earlier confidence as the sheer number of bastards becomes overwhelming. He curses them for ganging up on him like cowards, asking if they have any conscience at all. Pinned beneath the weight of the chitinous legs, he desperately demands they fight him one-on-one like men. The situation turns dire as he realizes he is in over his head, slipping into a desperate struggle for survival. The realization hits him that this entire region isn't just a hunting ground, it is a massive ant nest. He decides he needs to escape upwards first to properly assess the situation. He leaps into the air, momentarily relieved by the thought that these creatures cannot fight while airborne. His relief is cut short as a massive ant lunges from the sand, striking him mid-flight. The impact is brutal, sending him crashing back toward the earth as his tactical advantage vanishes. Xian stares in disbelief at the creature's agility, realizing that such a feat should not be possible. A massive explosion of sand follows as he is driven into the ground. He coughs violently, his lungs burning as he struggles to find his breath. Panting heavily, he lies in the dirt, the physical toll of the ambush finally catching up to him. Blood streaks his face, and his vision wavers as the swarm closes in for the final blow. Despite the agony, Xian finds the strength to hurl one last defiance toward the horizon. He tells the old geezer that he better be watching closely to see exactly how he survives this. From a high rocky outcrop, Odin sits calmly with his massive sword planted in the earth, watching the struggle below. He notes that Xian finally has the right attitude. Odin muses that in a world turned to desert, Xian's ability is a blessing like no other. He acknowledges that Xian could have used that power to live a comfortable, enviable life, though he knows that such a path would have led to a dead end. Odin reflects on the close-minded idiots of the world who obsess over illusions without understanding why their civilization fell. To him, an awakener's strength is the only true power, and there is nothing people covet more than an ability like Xian's. He poses a silent challenge to his student, asking if he truly wants to become strong and survive. If Xian has managed to endure this long as a weak being, Odin decides it is now time for him to learn to survive as a true awakener. He watches the carnage below, waiting to see if the boy can make it to the very end in this crazy world.